Hi, I'm Laura.
I'm Deanne.
I'm Philippe.
Welcome to our Lymond book club. We are reading Queen's Play by Dorothy Dunnett. We are on part 3, chapters 3 and 4. Dee will lead us through a discussion of these chapters, but before we do that, what are you guys' initial reactions?
I feel completely vindicated from my disaster of the beginning of the book. That's how I feel.
Why?
I just read these 2 chapters. I was going, yep. So just that, like, Una helped Lymond, and well, Lymond isn't dead. We knew that for sure, but Una was the one who helped him. And then Margaret Lennox is back and doing nefarious things, and yeah, I just feel very vindicated.
How about you, Philippe?
I wasn't going to be fooled again. So Lymond imposter syndrome struck hard the moment Mr. I can't even remember his name.
Vervassal.
Vervassal. The second Vervassal opened his mouth and was talking about, like, they're not the Greek fates, but they're Greek names of some sort. I was like, oh, hello, Lymond. We need to get.
Yeah.
And of course he was limping, so I was like, I'm not gonna get fooled. Now, of course, it wasn't much of a reveal because you find it out later in that very chapter, but.
I was actually scared about that because I thought, oh, it's Lymond. He's got a cane and he's talking French and he's blonde. And then I'm like, wait a minute, but I got fooled last time. So then I was like, maybe it's not Lymond. Maybe it's Richard in disguise. I thought that for like 3 sentences, but I did have that, okay, don't get too fooled, don't get too sure that it's Lymond, because
It's wise that she doesn't drag it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we already played that once in this book, so. Yeah. It was fun following O'LiamRoe around without Lymond's sort of corrupting nature about. That was kind of cool. And yeah.
My favorite thing in this section is this is the first time we spend an extended period of time in Lymond point of view. We actually get a little bit of how his brain works and what he's actually thinking, which is so rare.
It's pretty cool. Okay, so cool chapters. Let's go. So we open up with Lymond in his thoughts and from his perspective. He is very, very injured, has been unconscious for almost a week, for 5 days. And Una is in the room with him, standing over him. So I just wrote, knew it, off to the side. But yeah, so any thoughts about that? I mean, I did love this one line where at the top of 275, where it says, explosively, Francis Crawford of Lymond turned his head. You just get the sense, like, he's so injured and he's so damaged that doing this was described as explosively.
Yeah. I think that, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, you go. I don't have much to add, so.
Oh, you go.
Okay, I was gonna say even the pain is even there under the layer of opium because she's been drugging him this whole time. Not to keep him subdued, just to help him out. He's got to be in a ton of pain.
He literally
says
later. Well, he literally says later that, like, being unconscious was the best thing that his body could have. I mean, that's later, but
yeah. Definitely. I think she was drugging him both to help him heal and to keep him from leaving.
Yeah. I love that it says he's sort of waking up, sort of groggy, and then it says, he did not appear to be dead. And that's his own thought. It's like, okay, I don't seem to be dead.
How did that happen? I'm so sure. I think it's notable right before he explosively turns his head that what makes him do that is sheer anger, sudden and life-giving. And he's angry because he's thinking about Richard or Tom or Erskine or whichever flaxen-haired nursemaid was going to patch him up this time. Why does that make him angry?
It's that sense of helplessness. He likes to do things on his own. He doesn't like to rely on other people's whatever. I mean, we saw how terrible of a patient he was for Richard in the Dell. So it's sort of more of that coming from him. Like, he doesn't want to be at the mercy of somebody else.
Yeah, and I don't think he's angry. He's not angry at the nurse, whoever the unknown nurse, you know. I think he's angry at the fact that he's dependent. And, you know, they're going to, because he said whoever was going to patch him up this time would have to work hard, sheer anger. And then it's sort of like this interruption of anger. And so at his own anger, at his own lack of agency in the situation, lack of control.
Yeah, he's definitely a little bit of a control freak too. We also have the tally of injuries here: broken leg, ribs, collarbone, and wrist. At least that's not good.
As someone who has broken my wrist, not fun.
As someone who was there when it happened to you, it's not fun at all.
Somebody who was there 3 hours later, no, it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
So then I think there's also some interesting bits in there. One is like, why does she save him? And then two is the fact that she clearly knew all along who he was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She calls him Mr. Crawford.
It seems like her reason is she's like, I dislike being coerced, you know, which is I think totally consistent with her character that we've seen so far. Like, she doesn't like being told what to do. And, you know, so she's just like, she was so mad. You know, we saw that resistance earlier about keeping quiet and not warning them and all of that. And so
Teresa Boyle also accused her of, you know, like having a thing for Lymond, being attracted to him. So I think we don't know also like what Balance was like also that she's attracted to him. Like, definitely it's that she doesn't like to be coerced, but there's sort of this subtext or semi-text about her liking him. Or at least being attracted to him. I don't know if she likes him, actually.
I don't think it'll be interesting to see if either of them act on that at any point. Like, so I think he's kind of attracted to her too. But I don't know if
I don't want it to happen, but it's going to.
Why don't you want it to happen?
I just don't like these two together. I don't know. Maybe they're going to be the best couple in the world, but like, you know.
I'm still holding out for Kate and George's kid.
Philippe.
Gideon's kid. Kate and Gideon's kid.
Yeah, Kate and Gideon's kid. Yeah. Philippe. Yeah. I know that's still ridiculous. She's way too young. Enough time has not passed. I don't care. I'm still holding up for her.
No, but if Lymond is now younger than we thought he was, which seems to be the case, then it doesn't seem as bad as I thought when you first brought that up. So
yeah, like I don't think it's bad, especially if we get like 5 or like 7 years in the future. You know, like if she's like 17 or 18 and he's like 26 or something like that, 20, like that's not bad. I mean, it would be bad today. I'm not advocating that, but in a literary sense, it's not bad.
At the time. And I'm sure that Gideon and Kate they would give Lymond their blessing. That's what I'm trying to say. Well, maybe not.
You think Kate would?
They like him. They think he's got a good head on his shoulders.
Like him. Yeah.
I don't know. We're totally talking about a supposition.
This is a ridiculous idea that never happened.
Right? Back to Una.
Back to Una. Yes.
I agree with you, Philippe. I do not think they are good. I don't even think they're good in the, like, we're both feisty characters and we could come together in an explosion. I don't even think they're good in that sense. Like, I just don't see how they would benefit each other in any way.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe have angry sex and then that's it or something, but I don't know.
I feel like our negative opinion of her is because every word out of her mouth is something mean, which is often very self-defensive and there's an underlying reason, but it's still just like consistently mean.
Yeah. But we haven't seen, I think part of my problem with Una is that I don't feel like I've seen an underlying reason enough, other than her aunt is a horrible person who's clearly abused her. But, which is bad, don't get me wrong, that's bad. But I just don't feel like as she's written, I've seen a reason for her to be so mean all the time. Like, it's obviously a defense mechanism, but we don't have any like sense of what she's defending, you know? So she just seems mean.
Yeah. I wonder if the secret villain, Dominique, is holding something over
Really?
her. Or not.
Maybe. Or he's promised. I feel like it's gotta have something, because I'm intrigued, because we don't know what her purpose is. We don't know what her and Madame Boyle are doing. It's gotta have something to do with Ireland, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Has to. So maybe he's promised something, but he doesn't seem, Dabney doesn't seem to be in a position of that much power. I mean, he's got a position of power, but he doesn't seem, at least the way that I've seen his character so far, he doesn't seem like he has like the intimate ear of the king all the time and the power to like do something extraordinary for Ireland. So I don't know.
All right, so onward.
Yeah, sorry. Page 3 of this chapter. So I've been there for 5 days, and he wakes up again. So then we just get more of Lymond and Una, and there's this bit about her midway down 276 where there's this short paragraph where it says, her hands closed together, a cage of white bone, which I just thought was such a great visual. Then leaning back, she settled her gaze on the low temporary bed, the bracing only visible in the brittle line of her jaw. Worn by solitariness and unconceited fears and an absence of sleep, she was more than ever a beautiful woman with no time for beauty. I thought that was a really good description of her, that she's solitary, has a lot of fears that she doesn't concede that she has, no sleep, and she's beautiful, but not that concerned with how beautiful she is.
I think also what's interesting in that is we're in Lymond's point of view, so he's thinking she's beautiful.
Right.
And a lot of these descriptors could also be used about him, in particular, the solitariness, the lack of sleep. And I think going back to how I still think every main character in this book is some aspect of what Lymond could become. There's this aspect of him that could be going in the Una direction, which at this point we know that bitterness is a key part of it, but there's other aspects too. Spoilers. We'll get to it later.
Well, this idea of unconceded fears, I think, is important. Like, what is she afraid of? And that's a huge motivating factor. So whatever it is that she's afraid of could be behind what she's doing.
Yeah, for sure. I think also a parallel between them, which we'll get to later, is she uses sex to get her ends, and so does he. And we can talk about it when he sets the place on fire. What pisses him off so much, I think, is she basically calls him a whore.
Yeah, and neither of them are subtle about that. But she seems to be a little less sensitive about it than he is. Like, he's responded to that multiple times with a passionate response, or has almost lost his cover with it. And she seems to be kind of blasé about it. I mean, yeah.
He is definitely very sensitive about it, and she draws an explicit parallel between the two of them, right?
Yeah.
I also just like the line, nothing had ever deceived Lymond about Una O'Dwyer. So he knew all along that there was way more going on with her, just like she knew all along that Tatty Boy was Lymond.
Although, interestingly, her target the entire time was O'Liamroe and not Lymond. which I thought was interesting. She wasn't targeting O'LiamRoe because she thought he was O'LiamRoe. She was targeting him because she wanted to get rid of him. So,
What were you gonna say, Philippe?
I don't remember.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I totally
What was I going to say? Oh, yeah, that he had prior news of her from Marietta. So,
Yes.
right.
have that really quick.
Right.
Um,
I'm super intrigued about Marietta because she was cousins with O'LiamRoe, right? And knew Una. So,
I guess everybody in Ireland knew each other. It was actually very small at that time. So it says, flat out, she knew who Taddyboy was. The man she'd wished out of the way had been O'LiamRoe. So there's our question: why did she want O'LiamRoe out of the way?
Yeah. And then why did out of the way switch to trying to seduce him later? Like,
but even when she was seducing him, she was like, "Go back to Ireland and wait for me."
Right,
So she's still trying to get him out of the way.
It's like different motivations for the same goal. Like, she doesn't care how she does it. She just wants him to go to Ireland. Okay.
Interesting.
So also I just find interesting in this whole sequence that we're in Lymond's point of view and we're seeing how he thinks. And he is very quick. Like, he figures out right away that whoever she's working for and whoever Robin was working for has to be the same person. And then also he asks about, is the bad guy going to transfer his attentions to my brother? So he's worried for Richard. So again, like, I like that we're getting, this aspect of him. And then the part that actually kind of shocks me is he thinks to himself, God, he must beg this woman to tell him his name, meaning the bad guy.
Yeah,
like,
feeling that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so,
He doesn't know already? You would think.
Right. So it's like Lymond definitely doesn't know at this point. As long as we can trust his, if we can trust this is from his perspective and he's thinking to himself things that are true, then he genuinely doesn't know who the villain is. Which kind of makes me wonder, like, how, and I'm not going to go back and look, but how much of what triggered our suspicion of Diabni was done outside of Taddyboy's presence. So, like, because I feel like if Lymond had seen what the readers, everything the reader sees, then he would know if it's Diabni. But
well, I think also some of you guys' suspicions came from, like, why is this guy in the narrative at this point? Which Lymond obviously doesn't have privy to that.
That's true. That's true. That's not an in context suspicion. You're right. That is true. That was my initial suspicion of Diabni is because of that. And then later there were some other things, but I think some of the things happened like in front of other characters, maybe. I can't remember. But.
So let's keep going.
Yeah. Okay. So I had a quick question and I didn't go back and look at it. Which scene was the interview on the island Isle d'Or? Which scene was that?
That was when Richard's two henchmen, Jody's Cross or whatever, and Fishy Pete, intercepted the guy that they thought was trying to kill Lymond, but he was actually sending a message from George Paris.
Yeah, his message
those
was
weren't
that
the name of the two people, but it was close.
And it was the message that O'LiamRoe went to England and Robin Stewart went to maybe Scotland.
Right. Okay.
Robin Stewart has disappeared, but we know where he went now.
Yeah. Okay. So then we get, I'm not sure how much of this you want to cover, but there's just all the scene of Lymond and Una together. She reveals that his Taddy Boy identity is dead, which is one of the things that Philippe and I kind of wished for last time. So that is true, like, because he's being blamed for the accident at the tower, and then there's this, we see later along with that that the court has kind of repositioned their attitude about Taddy Boy, and the tone of the court has like switched from this kind of crude, licentious debauchery thing that he was really leading to a more stiff and structured etiquette. Like, no, we're very proper. And it was all his fault. And so if he showed up again as Tatty Boy, like, it would be bad. So,
well, they've also sort of framed him for the theft of some royal jewels. They like
he got framed for some
just to, you know, sweeten the pot of if he ever does show his face again.
Yeah, the royal jewels in your room, and they're questioning your identity, and you know you're going to be hanged by a. I love. He says, Una says you're going to be hanged as a spy. Fascinating situation. Think it over next time you're awake. Good night. Sleep well.
Like that's gonna work.
Yeah.
But I think the interesting thing is, right after that, right, she had made only one error. The news she had just given him roused nothing but a sense of challenge and an instant reluctant admiration. He admires her.
Right.
But what she had said just before had set free his cold, quick, terrifying temper. What she said just before was, "What shall I be? Like Tatty Boy Bala, surely."
So why do you think that's calling him a whore? Like, because he says, if you wait, you lose everything. I promise you that. And losing it, what shall you be? And so she says, what shall I be like Tatty Boy? So she's saying the only thing left for me if I lose everything is being a sex worker like you.
Yeah, because he already knows, and there's all these references to he knew all about her and stuff like that. And we saw how she was with O'Liamroe. She's using sex to get what she wants for whatever her underlying motivations are. Right. So it's like that, you know, I thought about this a lot, trying to figure out why is this making him so angry, and like that's the only conclusion I can come to, and I think the text supports it.
No, I think that's right, because I went through and I was like, okay, is it that phrase? And then I was like, because the thing she says before that is the bit about George Paris and the interview, which that doesn't seem like something that would make him angry. So it's got to be that line. Yeah, and I agree, because if what he says is, you know, if you wait, you lose everything. I promise you that too. And losing it, what will you be? In other words, if you lose everything, what's left for you? Nothing. You could become a prostitute. Like, you won't have any way to get through. And then she just comes back with that biting, oh, really? Like you? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And it would make sense because he's so sensitive about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
I also like the explicit reference to his cold, quick, terrifying temper. Because I feel like we didn't see that much of it in Game of Kings, aside from like maybe when he slaps Will when he's a Spaniard. But like, he does have a temper.
Yeah, we didn't really. That was not an impression I had from him from book one.
Yeah, but the interesting thing with his temper is like he has a temper, but it goes really quickly. Like, he's not like, I'm out for eternal vengeance. He gets angry and then he moves on.
Burns hot and fast.
Yeah. But then it's really shocking what he does. It's really violent and dangerous. He sets the whole place on fire.
Yeah.
It's a silly thing to leave a candle so close to a prisoner.
But she probably didn't think he was going to do that.
Moved his broken arm out. Like, he was tied down except for the arm that was in his sling because it was broken. So that wasn't that crazy. Yeah, so then he sets the house on fire. And she kind of tries to save him, but then doesn't, like, finish saving him.
Well, there's not much you can do. Like, people would see it.
Yeah. So she kind of pulls him to the edge of the house, but doesn't actually take him out of the house.
I love, by the way, that he's laughing while they drag him free.
Yeah. And then he gets rescued by thieves, guys who are going to plunder the house, which was funny. And then they meet the old lady fortune teller. She's great. I really like this bit with her. She basically, I'm not sure how much we need to dwell on it, but Archie sets up this set of relationships that are just available for him if he needs them, and he knew about them. So he goes to this woman that Dom did Doubtance? No clue.
The audiobook narrator says Doubtance.
Dame de Doubtance.
I don't know how Dorothy Dunnett said it.
So, and I love the fact that in a historical novel that's set several hundred years before the present, there's a character who's living several hundred years before the present. It's so great. So she's sort of living this medieval, I just see her as like cosplaying the Middle Ages in his house in France.
She has a wimple. She does all of those long embroidered stitches all over her.
Yeah, it's like she's in the, I don't know how many people watching this are in England, but in America we have a thing called the Society for Creative Anachronism, and it's people who sort of dress up and live in the Middle Ages, and some of them take it more or less seriously. And I just saw her as like an SCA person who's taking it super seriously. She's got the outfit, she's got the phrasing, she does all of that, but she's also super serious about fortune telling, and so she wants to know his. She wants to make his chart, and so she needs to know his date and time of birth. And
well, before we go there, also just want to highlight about her the way it describes her. For she was not a mouse, but rather a tall, half-plumed predator, pale spot eyes glaring, mouth flatly downturned into the jaw, and she had a temper. So she's not a cute, adorable Renaissance fair lady.
No.
She's a scary predator lady.
She's a fierce lady. Yeah, and there's kind of this idea, like, if you came to her to get your chart read or something, she might throw you out of the house, or she might read your chart, and you just don't know.
Yes.
But
then there's this whole amazing, like, fate and luck thing happening here, because Una leaves him in the house, and then these guys just happen to find him, and then they just happen to agree to like rescue him, and they take him to the Dame de Doutance's house, and then Gautier, the usurer who lives on the ground floor, is like, he just so happens to really, really want a wheelbarrow so he can rescue his stuff. So he's like, yes, of course I'll pay you for it, and takes Lymond in and hides him.
And recognizes his face from Archie's description, which that's pretty impressive.
It also sort of shows you the danger that a fire in a random house would have had in these medieval villages where everything's made of wood. Like, these people live like streets away from this fire, and they're packing up their stuff and bringing it down to the river so it doesn't burn.
Right. I mean, it just makes me think of like the Great Fire of London, where like the city burned down, you know, and that's a danger here. So like the whole city could burn down.
Which also reminds you that Lymond was being a little irresponsible by setting the place on fire.
Yeah.
No.
How set places on fire in the 1500s? That's just.
Admittedly, the text says it was more successful than he expected, so maybe he didn't quite expect it to be such a big conflagration, but yeah.
Maybe he grew up in a castle that was mostly stone, and so he wasn't thinking about it, but like the whole town's made of wood.
But anyway, I love this idea that these weird sort of coincidences of fate bring him to the Dame de Doutance.
Yes. And I really love the fact that Archie is. I want more of Archie. If you know, when we talk about like what we want more of, I want more of Archie because he seems super prepared, and he's like a great Robin / what's Batman's butler's name?
Alfred.
He's like Robin / Alfred. Like he seems to be like super helpful, but very much a side character. But I don't know. I'm intrigued with him.
Well, he's a little bit paternal or maternal, I suppose, maybe.
Yeah. Okay, so can you translate the things?
Yes. So the context, right, is Lymond and the Dame de Doutance confront each other. He's on like the landing of the stairs and she's looming above him. And she greets him with Aucassin, Damose, Sire. I can't pronounce French, I'm sorry. Which is from...
That's for that every time.
I know, but it's so bad. Which is from the Ballad of Aucassin and Nicolette, which you may remember there was a line from it in Game of Kings, so I mentioned it then. But it's a ballad, which at some point I'm going to get to it in here. the medieval love story, like what's the one over the wall? Pyramus and Thisbe.
Oh yes, Pyramus and Thisbe.
It's like that kind of flavor.
The wall.
So, a 13th century legend of Provence. In verse and song, it tells of the romantic adventures of a young man and his love for the captive Nicolette. And so, what she says to him, "Aucassin, young man, sir." And then the whole thing that they kind of read, I will just read it all to you. It's 3 sort of sections. "Aucassin, young man, sir, I am indeed your beloved, and you do not hate me. For you, I have been put in prison, in this vaulted room, where I lead a most dismal life. But, by God, Son of Mary, I shall not be held for long if I can yet. Sweet sister, how it would please me if I could rise directly. Whatever falling back would mean, if I could be up there with you, I would kiss you warmly. If I were a king's son, you would indeed have dealings with me. Sweet sister, friend, beloved."
Okay. I love that Lymond gets a little panicky because he knows he should know the appropriate phrase, but his brain is not working. So he's like, "Christ," thought Lymond, thrown into mild hysteria by the greeting, and hazily he sought an apt quotation in return.
This is the most Lymond thing ever. He's fleeing for his life and begging to be rescued and, like, you know, super horribly injured. And all he can think of is, I can't believe I can't think of the right quote.
Damn, I need the medieval passion play. They're not passion play, the passion poem quote, and I can't think of it.
But he does. He pulls it out. He pulls it off. And I like also how it describes he never did recollect much except in nightmares of the subsequent exchange, which is kind of revealing that he has nightmares about this experience. But also, so she obviously knows who she is, and part of it she calls him Aucassin le Beau le Blonde, meaning the beautiful, the blonde. So she knows who he is, and then she also refers to having known his grandfather and Sibylla later. So who is this lady?
Right, like, not only because knowing his grandfather is one thing, because it said something about his grandfather being, like, beloved in Scotland and France, but Sibylla is not the daughter of his grandfather, right? Because Sibylla is his father's wife, and the grandfather is the father of his father, because it's Lord Coulter, so it would be his dad's father. So somehow this lady knows both his grandfather and his grandfather's daughter-in-law, who's his mother. So their interaction is, it's not like his grandfather stopped by one day with his little kid and she met them both. Like, there's more to it than that, which is interesting. Yeah.
What could be going on there? Also just he's thinking of, he's remotely entertained by the crazy parallel between his affairs and the ballad.
Crazy the way that happened, that there's parallels between Lymond and some medieval ballad. I'm so shocked by that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about 285, where there's a little bit of, like, magic going on. Like, what's happening here? Like, she reads his mind? Or does she just know about his house already? And so, because he doesn't say anything, right?
Right.
Like,
so,
what's happening there?
Okay, so they're in 1500s, and people took astrology very seriously.
Right.
So there is some ambiguity in how we interpret this, but it actually starts on 284. There's 3 things that could be her reading his mind. The first one is he could sense her mind, firm, powerful, grotesque, scaling the ramparts of his. Does that mean she's psychically, literally invading his consciousness, or does that mean she's looking at him, observing him really closely, and figuring him out despite his normal ability to hide things? And their wills are interlocked, so she's looking at him and trying to, like, figure out something from him or figure him out. And then she says, "You keep your secrets well. Make my compliments to Sibylla. And it says, then as if a gentle harness had collapsed, he lost all sense of her and of the room once again. So was her psychic power going into his brain and keeping him awake in order to try to figure out his secrets and read his mind?
Or was
or were they
that he, like, his focus collapsed?
Right, or was it just an intense, exchange where they're looking at each other and then his focus collapsed? Yeah, so
Yeah.
it may not be supernatural, but it may.
Okay, if this is supernatural, because I feel like the third example is the most supernatural here. If this is supernatural, is this the first example of supernatural that we've had in the series so far? I don't remember anything.
I think so.
Right, so we had a lot of it was Johnny Bullo, but it all turned out to be fake.
Right, it all turned out to be fake. So, like, that's why I was like, what the hell's happening here? Because I felt like it was kind of set up earlier that this is not a world where the supernatural stuff is happening. If it is, I'm fine with that. Like, I'm totally fine with having some supernatural stuff happening in our story. But it just seems odd compared to what we've seen so far.
So there's a number of potential explanations. So at this point, we can read it either way. So it says, all he had to do was frame the instruction, which had been gripped clearly in his mind since he wakened, the 4 words he had rehearsed over and over to say. So maybe he was talking in his sleep, maybe when she was the only one there. Maybe she knows about 70 from some other way because she already knows all this stuff about him, knows his grandfather, knows his mother. So she could have already known about it.
Right.
But she's an astrologer.
Yeah.
And she's a fortune teller. Fortune tellers are excellent at reading people and, knowing the right things to say and make you think, wow, they must be psychic. And yet we know that, in the real world, they're not.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not like that would have changed in the last 400 years.
Right.
So, yeah, my assumption reading this was that she knew about his property in the same way that she knows his grandfather and his mother, and like she just knows about him somehow, and she that's a logical place for him to go and hide and recover. So that's what. So and she could tell he wanted to say something, and just like that was a logical deduction in the fortune teller way.
And it is a logical deduction, right? You could definitely read it that it's not actually any psychic power.
I mean, I'd like it. It would be fun if she was actually psychic and if we're getting some supernatural stuff in the story. But if that's going to happen, then I want to see it more than just this. I don't want there to be like just this one little instance of something supernatural that never shows up again.
So do you want this story to go in a more supernatural direction?
I'm 50-50. I don't think I care. What do you think, Luis?
I want to see it stay in the realm of reality here. I mean, it's already a little bit unrealistic, all the things that Lymond can do at his age specifically. So I'll keep my fantastic realism bent on that. I don't know, I'm okay with a little bit of ambiguity about a character, but I certainly don't want to see magic spells start being used and dragons descending from the sky. I mean, I know we're not going to go that far, but I like those kinds of books, just not, in this.
I would love to see Lymond encounter a dragon. That would be awesome. If anybody knows of any fanfic where Lymond encounters a dragon, let me know.
I mean, we've got 4.5 books to go. You never know.
That's true.
Don't go to AO3 looking for fanfic until you finish the series, though, because you'll get spoiled by all the ships.
I'm staying away from everything.
Okay, so just a couple more notes on this section. We get 2 other interesting character notes on her. One is her philosophy of life was just, but harshly just, which is a little similar to Lymond, how he can be ruthless sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I just, were you going to say?
That's connected to the fact that her ideas about life are just all about astrology charts. So whatever troubles you've had, whatever joys you've had, it's all lines on a chart. And
not a big one for empathy. And then her English was the English mauled and unregarded of a person who spoke many languages and left them broken hinged and crumbled like clams, solely attacked for the meat.
Yeah.
What a way to describe, and you could just yeah, I've heard that from people,
Right.
like very utilitarian. I'm going to learn what I need to know to do the communication, get what I want out of it, and I don't care if it's perfect.
People who travel a lot, and it's like, I know just enough like Dutch to function in here. I know just enough, you know, whatever city they're in to get by. Yeah.
And then also just at the end of this section, again, interesting because we're in Lymond's point of view, which is so rare. He actually is so stressed and exhausted and drugged that he loses his ability to see. And so he's in this blind void and he has to force panic out of his brain, which is, again, not how we're used to seeing our competent hero. And interesting that it goes so far that he loses his sight.
And we actually saw that earlier too at the house, where it was like the only sense that he could depend on that was clear was his hearing, and everything else was gone. So yeah. Okay, so he goes to Savigny.
I recognize this because in Phantom of the Opera, Raoul is the Vicomte de Sévigny. So.
Wow.
You know. Although I looked for it on the map in the front of the book and it's not listed, so I don't know where it is. I guess I could look at a real map. So.
Okay.
Or it could be a fictional 70.
Maybe.
Yeah. So we get this little bit. We return to Richard and the Dowager and everybody, which I love. We got a sense of what's going on with them. And for a day and a half, they thought he was dead. For a day and a half. So at least they didn't think it beyond that.
And Tom is like freaking out about Richard.
Yeah. I mean, Richard loves his brother and he's deeply, deeply sad. But then Archie sends a message, and so they know that he's at Sevigny and to be approached by no one, not by Richard, nor by the Erskines or their friends. So he's off by himself. And then we get, like, time is passing. So February and March, and so he's healed. Basically, Lymond is healing. So he's getting better.
And hopefully being sober the whole time.
I mean, hopefully.
Maybe not completely sober, but not drinking as much as he was. Those are my hopes.
Yeah, hopefully. So he's trying to. I love this. We're back to the Dom where she tells Richard to stay in France, and the implication is that he follows her advice, like, right? Like, I mean,
He's got other reasons to stay.
But it's just interesting that she seems to have influence. But I guess it does go back to, like, fortune telling was taken seriously, and she was clearly respected, like, in the town, and that, and knows his name.
Also, I like that she looks at Richard with an irritating kind of tolerance.
Oh, Richard. Yeah. So Tom is gonna leave. Jenny Fleming, despite all of her shenanigans, is getting packed back to Scotland, or to England, and then probably to Scotland. Her journey's going to be direct, it says. Richard's taken over protecting the Queen, and it says Lymond could not be dead, or Abernathy at least would have told them. So Richard is still worried about Lymond. Like, he's still kind of freaking out because he hasn't seen him. But how badly he must be maimed to enforce this isolation, this enervating silence, was a thought carried bitterly day and night. So Richard is just mulling over his brother. And any reappearance had been made impossible by this new attack, the extraordinary revelation in the most circumstantial detail of theft and perfidy. So this, Tatty Boy's been revealed as a huge traitor, blah, 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 whatever. So,
so notably, Richard is relieved by this a little bit too, though, because at least Francis was safe, if only from himself.
Yeah.
Like Philippe was saying, like maybe he'll sober up.
Yeah. So he can't come back and resume this life of debauchery and all of that. And this proves that not only the false evidence on Taddy Boy proves that not only was Stuart working with someone else, but that the someone else is not overseas. So, which kind of makes me feel like they suspected the Lennoxes. Or maybe not, but they suspected somebody overseas. And, I guess why would they suspect the Lennoxes? I guess that's...
it still could be the Lennoxes. He is a Lennox.
Maybe. That's true. So they know he's not working alone, and they know the person he's working with is somewhere here. So, but there's this other bit where Lymond, so they're hamstrung by their ignorance, as Lymond himself must have planned, for in their ignorance lay their safety. And that's just so him. He's going to keep everybody in the dark because they're safer in the dark, and then all the risks will be taken by him, and everybody else will be safe. And that's
never seems to work out that well for him.
No, but it does seem par for the course for his intentions. So, and then we get this whole scene where a sense of acute spiritual discomfort hung over the flower of France, the aftermath of its brilliant flare of indulgence. So that was just kind of this nice summary of the change that has happened in the court.
Yeah, but no one is putting whores on cows' backs anymore and whipping them through the town.
And nobody's
what a shame.
Running hell-bent for leather over rooftops and running into schoolgirls' bedrooms and all of that.
I think that there's like a bittersweet quality to this, because Taddy Boy in moderation makes life more fun. Taddy Boy in excess is a nightmare. So it's a little...
Like the pendulum has swung the other direction is what it feels like. So now nobody's having any fun. Like they're just all buttoned up and proper.
Yeah. And
Poor
it's also...
Tengen. What's he going to do now?
I know.
I'm sure he's got a new paramour already.
Just hiding more discreetly.
But also the irony, or the whatever it is here, is this is exactly what Robin Stewart warned Lymond or Taddy about at the very beginning. When Taddy first seduced the French court, Robin kept saying, you're just a trend to them. They're going to chew you up and spit you out. What's popular today is not going to be popular tomorrow. And, he was completely right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh wait, I was just say also there's a nice little resonance here too, because we went through like the festival season, Mardi Gras, and then we hit Lent, and then we're going to Easter. So we have this whole like excess, and then the sort of like the Lent thing, the deprivation, whatever, and then we have the resurrection.
That's true. Yeah. Lovely parallel. Okay. So next chapter we get to hang out.
Fan art of the previous chapter.
Okay, and then we can go hang out with O'LiamRoe for a while.
Yay! Inspector O'LiamRoe.
Oh my god, he's so adorable. Okay. This one is Una saying, sick people talk too much, from Striped Rose and Sketchpads on Tumblr.
Okay.
Okay. Onward to O'LiamRoe, Detective O'LiamRoe.
Okay, so I have many things to say about this chapter, not the least of which is that I think the image of O'LiamRoe skulking around behind bookshelves with a borrowed professor's cloak and slouchy hat, listening to this conversation, like trying to overhear this conversation while pretending to read a book, and then walking out the bookstore with the book in his hand, is so hilarious and just adorable. And I love the image of him doing this. Like, he's trying so hard to be, a successful spy, and he's doing a pretty good job. Like, he's competent. Like, he he got up, he listened under the window, they didn't catch him, like they didn't even catch a hint of him, like they weren't even suspicious. And then he was able to figure out where their meeting was, and then he overheard the meeting, and like, you go, buddy. It's pretty good.
There's also been a few references to Lymond like mentoring him and trying to change him, and he does it in a very Lymond way. He's spying, he's wearing disguises.
Right. Yes.
Out.
He shaved off his beard like to be a disguise. Yeah, like it is very Lymond like.
And actually, he makes the same mistake Lymond makes. He underestimates Margaret Lennox.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true.
Well, it doesn't help that he's staying with them. You would think
Yeah,
that anything you learn from Lymond, it's don't go near the Lennoxes.
Yeah, it does seem like he's giving her kind of a head start by actually staying in her house.
Well, he doesn't know that she's the Antichrist. Who would think?
That's true. Okay. So as for specifics, let's see. Where do we want to go? Yeah, okay. So as soon as we mentioned, this is just to his own startled amusement, he was staying in the Hackney mansion of the Earl and Countess of Lennox, and I just wrote, ha! Like, there she is! So, she's here.
I wrote O'LiamRoe, run away, bad idea.
I know, bad idea.
Far away.
Bad idea. And of course we get this description of Matthew again as just like befuddled. Like he's got a faintly bewildered suspicion, you know, he's just clearly he is not the brains of that outfit. And so it says, and then a little later he met Lennox's wife, Margaret, too, and she had suggested that he should come for a spell as their guest. And I just put, oh, that's not good, like on the side. So it was her suggestion that he comes and stays with them. So
obviously she knows that he was with Lymond and that Lymond was in disguise in France. I mean, it's gotta be. Why else would she be like, yeah, come stay with me, random Irish guy that I just met?
Yeah, exactly. There's gotta be something there. So, well, I mean, George knows. George Douglas.
Exactly, George Douglas knows.
Yeah, so clearly she knows. So, yeah,
and also,
it's not out of the realm of possibility that she would know.
Yeah. And also we just get this in the back of O'LiamRoe's mind, like something that he'd once heard about his late Olive and Margaret Douglas. And this is, I think, a reminder not only that they had an affair, but that Lymond is a threat to her heir's legitimacy because he could claim paternity. Even though he's definitely not the father.
Yeah, and then he's like, but then I love that O'LiamRoe's just like, whatever, I'm not going to think about it because I'm leaving Lymond in France and I just don't want to deal with it.
I also like the way that he describes O'LiamRoe's impression of the English, which is that they're very similar to the French, but added to their ambition a concern on some days more serious than others for the land, for the people, for religion. Kind of saying that the English are not as bad as the French.
Yeah. Okay. And I do also love that O'LiamRoe is saying, so he's getting rid of Lymond, but the one person that he does care about in this whole situation is the young queen. So he said, well, that's what he's saying to himself, you know.
I think that's true because they had that little interaction over the dead pets.
Yeah. I mean, I think he actually does still care about Lymond. I don't think he's quite as mad. I don't think he's quite as mad as he's telling himself. But right now he's saying the only person he cares about is the threatened Scottish child. And so the vivid fact is that there's one vivid fact. Matthew Stuart, or Earl of Lennox, was older brother to John Stuart, Lord d'Aubigny. Thus, at second or third hand, O'LiamRoe might have news of the only person in the whole court of France for whom he felt sympathy, the threatened Scottish child, Queen Mary. So that's why he goes to stay with the Lennoxes, because he just wants to hear news of Queen Mary. But it also serves to remind us that the Lennoxes are related to John Stewart, and that's a nice little reminder. So, okay. So, let's see.
Also, O'LiamRoe has that little like crisis of self-esteem where he's like, you know, without his sort of pretending to not give a crap, he's left with this great inferior personality with whom he might have to live all his days.
Yeah, which I love that this next bit, he says, the O'LiamRoe had sloughed off Francis Crawford, but he was not happy in his new skin. And I feel like there's a couple of moments throughout this chapter where we get glimpses that O'LiamRoe is actually pretty self-aware. Like he's very aware of his own limitations and desires and his own personality. And so this idea that he is struggling with feeling like he's changed, or that this whole situation has revealed something about himself that he doesn't like, and he's not happy about what he's learned about himself. So I think that's
it just makes you think of how Una and Lymond were both talking earlier about like maybe we've done him some good between the two of us.
Yeah. So maybe he will work on changing.
And he does in this chapter. He steps up.
Yeah, I don't think he would have done what he does in this chapter if he hadn't spent some time with Lymond.
Because he certainly goes out of his way to, I mean, this is a huge amount of trouble, and yeah, for
sure, which he would not, like the O'LiamRoe we met at the beginning of the book would never have done all this. He would not get involved. He'd be like, not for me. I sit on the sidelines and I make commentary. I don't participate.
Yeah, this is a ton of effort. So he goes to visit Michelle Harrison's younger brother and Bryce. Bryce, I love that name.
Not a nice guy.
Not a nice guy. No. And I feel like from the very beginning, you get a sense of who this guy is, because it says the striking rooms, it's talking about his house, and it says the striking rooms betraying the static elegance and oddly edgy effect of a house furnished for entertaining, not for living in. And so you get the sense that this guy is completely about appearances and has no depth and no heart, because his house is not lived in. It's not a home. It's just a building that he entertains in. So, which I think is true. Like, that's a good...
Yeah, we get so few words of this character because, you know, he's not that interesting. She doesn't want to spend that much time on him, but the words are very precise that give you this idea of his character, and make him a well-rounded, nasty character, like, very effectively. Also, the thing about him having a gift for languages and how he's talking to Lymond later and he, like, messes up his words and he's so shocked by it because he's such a language guy. Like, this is such a random factoid about the guy, but she just weaves it in and makes him a character so effectively with it.
Yeah, like, you can tell who he is. I actually thought this, okay, when it goes down to talking about his languages, Bryce's gift was an ear for languages, able to mimic anything. He could remember dialect like music, idiom like the phrase of a tune. I totally thought, and maybe this will come up later, maybe he's not gone, like maybe there's more to him, but I thought, oh, something's going to happen where we overhear something that we think is someone else, but is actually Bryce, because it says he can mimic anything. So if he's got one of those ears and voices that can, like, hear someone speak and then mimic the way that they speak well enough that someone else thinks it's them, I'm like, oh, is this guy going to be part of is somebody going to get deceived later by listening to him speak in some way? That didn't seem to play out in this chapter, but I was like, that's a very specific character trait that is also super rare. So that seems odd. Yeah. Anyway, I do love this scene though, where O'LiamRoe's just trying to be nice. He's just trying to be like, hey, I know your brother. Let's hang out. Have a pint, you know, and this guy is just like, go away. And he's got like multiple versions of go away.
Like, so nasty.
So nasty. And O'LiamRoe's just kind of like, dude, why are you being so nasty?
He's got great comebacks.
To the point where O'LiamRoe leaves, realizing that he had been prepared for actual physical assault, which is not something we've seen from O'LiamRoe. Like, this sort of, you know, he seemed pretty laid back so far.
No, and this guy was just like, I'm not going to lend you any money. I'm not going to, like, if whatever you're selling, I'm not buying. I'm not going to lend you any money. I'm not going to, like, just go away. Like, whoa. Yeah, but then O'LiamRoe gets in such a nice burn before he leaves. It's so good. Where he says, that God save you, I make what profit I can out of the experiences that come my way, which is that's a good example of who he is. You know, like he makes the good out of what comes his way. That big boast of a man, Michel, would have knocked the head off me if I did not sample the hospitality of his small, clever brother that has all the strange tongues so pat. And devil mend it, I would say you use your tongue in the strangest way. The nearest I heard to it in nature was a retired streetwalker in Galway protecting her virtue. It's like, ouch.
Good burn.
And then he gives him some money and says, have a drink on me. Right. Which is, I feel like, is sort of the 1500s version of, like, here's a quarter, call someone who cares. You know, like, yeah, anyway. And then he does this lovely, like, sort of defense of Ireland and just says, our hides are stinking and our cheeses unkempt, but our loving hearts are strong and golden and shining like king cups in the peat, and you look lonesome, little man.
Which is this is the second time O'LiamRoe has kind of stood up for Ireland. Mm-hmm. So there is this, like, part of him that, you know, really does care about his country. So it's like, come on, guy, like, do something, make it better.
Yeah. And then he gets
also, well, I should say also notable that even though Bryce is horrible, he does have an ulterior motive, which is that he's hiding Robin.
Right.
So he's not just being horrible for the sake of being horrible, although
he's very deliberately trying to get rid of them. Yeah.
Although it's still horrible to be mean to poor O'LiamRoe.
He could have just, like, faked a headache or something and, like, get rid of the way he did. Anyway, but they get to the stable and Robin Stewart's horse is in the stable. So, which Dooley is the one who's, like, who pointed it out. I feel I'm still so intrigued with Dooley. Like, I feel like I was reading this earlier and I'm kind of like, I feel like he's kind of the Turkey Matt of this book. Like, we don't know very much about him. He seems like a good guy. He's kind of barely in the story, but he's in the story enough that we see him pretty often. So,
what makes him seem like a good guy?
Well, he seems to be helpful. Like, I mean, he's a good guy in absence of bad. Like, he doesn't seem to have done anything that's betraying anyone or yet. So
I don't think he will.
I mean, he's just doing his job.
Yeah, he's just doing his job. He's just a character. He's doing his job. But I kept waiting for there to be something more with him, and there hasn't yet.
I don't think he's like Turkey Matt, at least so far, because Turkey was always doing these little subtle things to, like, help Lymond or take care of Lymond or be loyal to Lymond.
He's more active.
Yeah, and I would say Archie's more like Turkey Matt. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, Dooley, he's just like a device kind of thing. Like, he just is there, but isn't really doing very much as a character. So I'm kind of, I don't know. I would like to see
more like Jess's Pete, or whoever that character was.
Yeah, he should be like Sarah's Dooley or something.
Well, he's not gonna find a partner when he's spending his life trailing after Phelim O'LiamRoe.
True. He needs to find a woman so he can be somebody else's pater.
But he also is very capable. I mean, he's used sort of a lot in these chapters as, like, an honest device, like to further the plot and get things done for the
right. Like, later he's sent as a messenger, and he's clearly capable. Anyway, it's Robin's horse, so yeah, and I love this little throwback to Loudus, and how, like, O'LiamRoe says that he seldom disliked anyone who can supply him with amusement, had found it unusually hard, even before the day of Loudus, to tolerate the archer's uneasy ways. So we get this little reminder, like, oh yeah, it was Robin that caused the dog to die, and he was kind of
and O'LiamRoe doesn't hold grudges, but that really hurt him.
Yeah,
he doesn't like Robin.
It's really
There's also a great line right after that where he's thinking about the unpleasantness of his last night with Tatty Boy, where Lymond was poisoned. And it says, he had told Una O'Dwyer that authority made monsters of mankind, but he had seen what authority abandoned could do. So in a way, Lymond inspired him by abandoning his authority and making Phelim, who's very suspicious of authority, realize that sometimes authority is good because you need to take responsibility for things.
Yeah. So O'LiamRoe asks the question in the next paragraph that I am also asking, which is, what part in all this did O'Connor play, whom Stuart had been directed to fetch? So I'm also curious about this. Is O'Connor going to show up? Is he just going to be a device that's far away and just an excuse for things? Or is he going to show up as a character? Is he part of what's going on with Una? Is that wrapped up with O'Connor?
Well, it's obviously something really important because it's this last irresistible question. That's what motivates O'LiamRoe to do the spying. So something about this question is super important, and we don't know what.
Yeah, and we have no clue what it is. So this last irresistible question. And then he starts sneaking around, and he's pretty good at it. So he goes and listens under the window. He climbs up on this little side roof and like listens under. He figures out which room is the study, and then he climbs up on the roof and he listens to the conversation, and they find out that they are seeking the patronage of Warwick, and they want Warwick to reward them for killing the queen.
And there's a little bit on 290 that sets this up, where it says, now that Somerset's power was in eclipse, he had ceded control of the nation to the Earl of Warwick. So Harrison is associated with Somerset. Somerset's power is going down, therefore Harrison wants to ally with Warwick, whose power is going up, supposedly. And this is the true historical context of like the political background that was happening at the time. And you might vaguely remember Somerset because he was the protector who was in charge during the rough wooing during Game of Kings.
Right. Yeah. So Warwick is in charge, it seems, and they want to get rewarded from him for killing the queen, which has huge implications. This, if Warwick actively supports the assassination of the young Queen of Scotland, that's a step. I mean, that's a big deal. So, like, I would imagine if England sort of like benefits as a side, like, hey, she died, we didn't have anything to do with it, like, that's one thing. But if the Earl of Warwick is actively involved in it, that's something else. So yeah, so we shall see.
Also, I think important and interesting in this scene between Bryce and Robin is that O'LiamRoe observes that Bryce knows Robin really well, and the aptness of his handling of Robin Stewart's quirks argued a very long friendship indeed. So Robin
they've known each other for years and years.
Yeah.
And apparently Robin hates the Lennoxes.
Seems like they both don't have a high opinion of the Lennoxes.
They both hate the Lennoxes.
I mean, who doesn't hate the Lennoxes at this point?
I know, but like Stuart hates them. Like then Stuart said with uneasy brusqueness, I said something once as I remember, but I don't have a kindness for the family, and that's the truth. Oh, I agree. Oh no, it's Bryce Harrison who says this. Then Bryce in his voice, amiable and unchanged, Bryce Harrison used an expression about the Lennoxes which O'LiamRoe had heard in the gutters of Dublin. So whatever he says about them is super bad.
Yeah.
And he says it in a very amiable, calm voice. So
I think it's notable that Robin, we know how needy he is for friends, and we know by the end of this chapter that Harrison is betraying him. So
Yet another person using Robin Stewart.
Yeah, he just can't escape this pattern. Even though he's awful, he's trying to get a kid killed. Still kind of feel bad for him.
I know, and I feel like this this drive to be accepted is his fatal flaw, right? And so you can see that, this is probably what got him hooked into Diabni in the beginning. It's what's gotten him, like, he's vulnerable to Bryce. He's going to get betrayed there. He was betrayed by Tatty Boy. Like, I think that's reasonable to say. He also betrayed him, though. I mean, but there was mutual betrayal. But it's like this fatal flaw. And you just wonder, like, if young Robin Stewart had devoted himself to somebody honorable and a true mentor when he was like 14, what kind of person would he have been? If he would have sort of thrown everything behind someone who would have actually taught him well.
Yep, he probably would have been a great guy.
Would have been a great guy. So they hate the Lennoxes, which who likes
Well, why wouldn't you? Yeah, everybody hates the Lennoxes. Even their allies hate them. Remember in Game of Kings where they spent every single scene with their allies fighting with them?
I know, like, does anybody like them? Have we encountered anyone who likes them?
No.
Okay, so let's see. Is there anything else you want to?
Well, so we get the big reveal that Robin Stewart believes that he has killed Tatty Boy Bala, and O'LiamRoe is like, oh my God, when he was when he was so drunk and I was throwing stuff at him, he was actually dying.
Yeah. And then, well, that speech that Robin gives, I think this is the core of Robin at the top of 296, where he says, folk like that, I hate them. They go through life sure of everything, meddling with people. Why don't they leave them alone? No one asked him to interfere. He had land and plenty of money, everything easy from the day he was born, into a dry silk towel by the fire. Why did he want to come meddling with me? And so there's this woe is me bitterness in this speech, even though Robin knows he was a galley slave. Like, I mean, like, he knows that his life was not good, but all of that is just blocked out of his mind. And to him, Francis Crawford of Lymond is this meddling betrayer who strung him along and then dropped him like a hat. And,
that's his blind spot that's unsympathetic in a way, is because he thinks his problems are worse than anybody else's, and he can't recognize that other people suffer too. And especially Lymond, because like Lymond's life has been way worse than Robin Stewart's, and he, like you said, he knows at least some little hint of it. So there's really, he's so caught up in himself that he doesn't have empathy for other people.
Yeah, he's so caught up in himself. Let's see. What else was? He sends Sophie to France. Like, what else do you want to?
Well, so also there's this moment on 296 where O'LiamRoe exclaims, "Cormac O'Connor, you have a power to answer for."
Yeah.
Which is again like, why?
Yeah. What's going on? I mean, he like lists a whole bunch of like legendary Irish heroes and deities and stuff. Like, by all these people who I'm assuming, a couple of them I've heard of, but most of them I haven't. Like, you have all these things that are Irish to answer for. And I don't know. But he sent Dooley to France to inform the Scottish Dowager that Robert Stewart the Archer was likely the author of all the attempts on her daughter. Also, another sign of just Dooley is apparently pretty competent, that he sends his servant to France fully expecting that his servant is going to be able to get a message to the Dowager Queen. So that's pretty competent.
Well, it makes sense because he had the audience with her before, and she knows that he was helping Lymond.
Yeah. And here's just another sign of O'Liamroe's self-awareness, where when he gets back to the Lennoxes, he makes an excuse, and he kind of tries to slide in without them. Like, Lady Lennox met him as he came in and commented with her double-edged humor on his state. He made some excuse. He had money enough in his room to buy a new horse, and he was not conspirator enough to be sure of smoothing his face at the moment before either of the Lennoxes so disparagingly discussed by Robert and his friend. So he didn't want to have very much in contact with Margaret Lennox because he was afraid that he would give it away, and that he's not good enough at lying and spying to keep his face calm. And I love that he's aware of that, although he still failed.
Yeah, it's too late, dude. She knows.
More he should have snuck in by a side door. But he's like, okay, I can't talk to her very long because I can't keep track of this. But the whole coming in without his horse was
telling that he's willing to make these sacrifices. He sells his horse to send Peter to France, and so he has to walk back in the rain, which is ugh. But he's like, I'll do it for the greater good, and now he's going to be without a servant for weeks. So again, he's sacrificing for.
If they're in Hackney, and he sent Peter off by the docks, that's pretty far. I mean, I wouldn't want to walk that, and especially not in the rain. So
we also have, by the way, this line about Margaret having him followed, that this guy that she sends would spy for her and had killed for her.
Yeah, I put, Margaret is tracking O'Liamroe. This is bad. Yep. So, obviously, that's going to come up again. So then he goes to the French ambassador. And I put, I feel like the implication of all of this is that Margaret Lennox is knowing what's happening, because there's no way that O'Liamroe is going to go anywhere where she doesn't know where he is once she's put a tracker on him.
She's usually 10 steps ahead, so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's the thing, the same thing happened to Lymond, happened to Christian. No one expects her to be that deviously brilliant.
Yeah.
And evil.
Well, also, I just feel like she's got resources. She can just send people places, and she's just got enough people that she can sort of have maybe this thing with O'Liamroe wouldn't work out, but it doesn't matter to her because she's got the guidance there, so she can just be like, hey, stick on this guy for a while, let's see where it goes.
Yep.
And she's probably got a lot of that going on.
So I also love, I love the way the narrator actually points out that, considering how O'Liamroe had been flung out of France and then sort of exchanged sides with unseemly speed, it took a great deal of moral courage for him to accomplish going to the French ambassador and telling about what's going on. So much so that he's actually afraid that they won't even talk to him. And then I love the description of Duchameau, who's the French ambassador, who sees everybody.
Right, he's really incapable of selection.
Yes. And then this description of him is the best thing ever. Like a harassed caterpillar who could not achieve his metamorphosis, the ambassador held out a short and elegant arm and seated him.
Well, also that his face was like a leather trunk filled with butterflies.
Mm-hmm.
It's an English room with French furniture. And I'm just picturing these dark wood paneled walls and really spindly gold leafed white painted gold leaf furniture floating all around.
It's just there's so many little Dunnett treasures in these books, and there's 6 of these dense books, and it's you just want to savor everything because there's so much.
Right. So he goes to the French ambassador and tells this story that's just utterly delightful of him going to this bookstore and shaving his beard so they won't recognize him, and dressing up in this borrowed professor's cloak and like hat. Like clearly he's like reading a book, you know, in the bookstore, but
And then he walks out with the book and the bookseller chases after him.
he walks out the bookstore with the book, and he's just such an incompetent, but like he's not an incompetent spy, but he's confident and he gets the job done, but he's like kind of obvious at the same time.
So cute.
Yeah, super cute. And of course, Margaret Lennox is going to know all of this. So no matter how confident he is from hiding from Bryce, there's no way he's hiding from Margaret's man. So who probably actually overhears the same conversations.
Yeah. So also notable in this exchange is that Warwick actually is interested, apparently, in the scheme.
Right. He gets it done. So then we find out that Harrison is going to betray Stuart, Robin. So Harrison has already been to the French ambassador, already tried to negotiate his friend in exchange for favor and land and position and all of that. And so if they can get proof from Harrison, then they can arrest Robin, the whole point of which being find out who the mysterious D'Aubigny is. Really, if this is okay, I just have to say, if Philippe and I are wrong, if it's not D'Aubigny, I'm gonna hang up my hat because not anything in this
I will too. I'm pretty sure that we're right.
So embarrassed and humiliated, and it will be a sad, sad day. So I feel like I'm gambling, and I've like gone all in on this poker hand, and like I really.
You're making it entertaining for our viewers.
Please don't let this be a pair of twos. I really need like a full house or something on this one. Okay. So
there's a wonderful bit here about how O'LiamRoe is not going to go back to France because he might meet the shade of Phelim O'LiamRoe face to face.
France is full of ghosts.
Yeah. And the ghost of his former self is back there.
And I just kind of love that image of like France is full of bursting with ghosts. I'm like, oh.
And part of it is he's probably upset, even though he didn't end it well with Lymond. He's still upset about the way he died, supposedly.
Yeah, and then we have a lovely description of Margaret Douglas on the next page, which is just she's expressing concern for her guest, solicitous concern, expressed in the cool voice with which Margaret Douglas's sentiments were most often presented, ice fresh and bloody, like newly caught fish. Ooh.
Watch out for that one.
Oh. So then Harrison comes back to the ambassador to sort of finalize betraying Stuart, who's hiding out in Islington. So,
I know where these places are.
I know where these places are. It's so exciting. I mean, you know, if you're gonna hide out, might as well hide out in Islington. So then we get this guy who I was like, it's Lymond! And then I was like, wait a second, last time I thought somebody was Lymond, it wasn't Lymond. But it's definitely Lymond! So he picks up a handsome light stick and came over and sat down, like, definitely Lymond, right?
But it's so tricky and subtle how she introduces him, because she just goes, this time there were 3 of them in the room. Deschamaux himself, seated at his fine desk, an undersecretary, and someone's herald, deep in conversation with them both. So she brings in Lymond as someone's herald in the middle of the sentence.
Yeah. And I love it. He said, the man called Vervassal smiled. And it's like, as soon as we have the man called this, I'm like, oh, well, then that's not his name. He's just called that. So, yeah, and came over and sat down. And then it's interesting. So, Okay, the Herald, dealing with him point by point, was excellent, quick, accurate, and fair. His powers of treaty seemed to be unlimited. Harrison, no novice at bargaining, could admire his skill while jarred by something underneath the words. And I do like that we get the sense that Lymond has recovered, at least, like he's still walking with a cane, but he seems like his mental facilities have recovered. So he's quick and fair and excellent. So back to Harrison. Twice he found himself caught out in a foolish error of grammar. To Harrison, this was staggering, as shocking as if become partially undressed. And again, it was a nice little character thing, even though we barely know this guy. Yeah, but he felt ruffled beside this elegant person, fine as a fan stick, carved under warm water, from pale hair to the pale moving light of his rings. Harrison did not care for his eyes.
His cornflower eyes.
His cornflower eyes.
That would have been a dead giveaway, although it's pretty obvious at this point.
It is. But I will say, I was like, maybe I'm wrong, because I was wrong before.
But I think what's also super interesting about this description is it's in every way the opposite of Tatty Boy Bala.
Yes.
It's slim and neat and pale and sparkling and just and elegant.
Fair and excellent.
Excellent and accurate, right?
Yeah.
Literally the anti-Tatty Boy.
Yeah. So again, we just get the sense that Lymond has healed his injuries. He seems to be like sober. He's come out of this funk that he was in of whatever. Like he seems, at least
there's also some darkness here, and you don't know how much of it is because it's from Harrison's point of view and he doesn't like him.
Right.
But you know, he's jarred by something underneath his words. He doesn't care for his eyes. He feels ruffled. Like, what is it about Lymond that makes people so uncomfortable?
Yeah, but it is hard to see that from, because we know Harrison's so despicable. So it's kind of like if he's making Harrison uncomfortable, I'm kind of okay with that. Like, that doesn't necessarily mean anything's wrong with Lymond. So he does his business and he gets this, concession that he's going to betray his friend and he's going to get the favor of the dowager, a firm promise of satisfaction. And then at the end it says, the thing had gone just as he wanted. And I wrote, probably not. So that's a bad sign when you say like, oh, I got everything I wanted. Things are going to be great. Like, probably not. So they watch him go, and then we find out, yes, it's Lymond. So.
Well, and you know it's him because he starts out with Electo Megara and Tisiphone attend you, and may you be embalmed with the guts of a civet rat. Lymond didn't like him, so that's probably what made him so uncomfortable. And then allow me to read the explanation here from the Dorothy Dunnett companion, which says these are the three furies of hell, avenging deities personifying the bad conscience and remorse which follow evil deeds. They were not just confined to Hades, but would pursue the living to avenge their crimes.
I really don't like the guy. We get a hint of the politics that are weighing here when they say, officially we know nothing of Warwick's share in the plot, and for the sake of peace, we want to know nothing. So it's like, even though they know Warwick's involved, if that comes to light, it will be such a huge problem that they're just like, no, we're just not going to say anything about that. Which that happens all the time in history. We're just going to ignore that these other people involved, because if we talk about these other people being involved, then things will go super bad.
Cause more problems than it's worth, supposedly.
Yeah. So, and they say that he can, is it here where they say he can go back? I was interested about this. So Erskine, and somehow she doesn't specify, Lymond got back in touch with everyone. Like, the last time we saw them, he was sort of like, everyone's in ignorance and that's keeping them safe. And then several weeks go by, and then all of a sudden now he's being sent to England to the French ambassador with Tom Erskine and the blessing of the Dowager Queen. So sometime in the middle, everybody got back together.
Well, it's based. Go ahead.
I think it's the news that Robin Stewart was in England. I think it's the news that O'LiamRoe found and then sent with Peter Dooley to France. And I think because of that, they're like, we need Lymond for this one. So let's get him.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're right.
Well, and they kind of explain how it came about, which is that, or this guy's came about, which is that is a solution that's so simple that only Francis Crawford had thought of it, which is that his disguise is himself. And we know that he's complicit with the Queen Dowager and Tom Erskine in doing this because he's chatting with Tom and because he's going as the Queen Dowager's herald.
Yeah, just disguising himself as himself. The French ambassador is happy about this. He thinks it's great, except for the fact that Stuart had been an archer in the company of John Lord d'Aubigny, and Lord d'Aubigny and his wife Anne had been the firmest friends of the ambassador, the Chamals, for many years. So he's not so happy because the arrest of Stuart will reflect badly on his dear friend d'Aubigny. So then we get a little hint that, let's see, I wrote a note about Tom. Oh, up at the top of the page, it says, the masker of Erskine joined them, the distaste which they all felt on his face, but his practical good sense already discounting it. No sense cursing the man. So they just don't like this guy. He's awful. And
he's a traitor, but he's helping them, so they have to just kind of bear it.
Yeah. Tom.
A man named Crawford.
Huh?
Like there's this third person in this scene called Crawford, right? Or is that actually Lymond?
No, it's Lymond.
Lymond.
Okay. I got very confused because I thought Lymond was being Vervassal, and then we had Tom Erskine, and then there's this third person named M. Crawford that I thought was just some random.
Yeah, no, that's Lymond because Vervassal isn't a secret identity. It's just it's like a title. Vervassal Herald is the title of the Queen Dowager's Herald.
Lymond.
He's Francis Crawford of Lymond, Vervassal Herald.
All right, I'm done. Goodbye. That was stupid.
No. So Lymond is like he snuck out of France by pretending to be himself, Francis Lymond.
No, don't worry, it's super confusing.
Yeah.
I didn't pick up a tenth of what you guys pick up on my first read.
I really do think, though, honestly, the only reason we're able to pick all this stuff up is because we're reading it so slowly. Like, this is not how I normally read a book. Like, I normally would have read this book in like a day and a half, you know?
Yeah, that's why I got so much out of rereading it so many times, because there is so much, and the first times you're just like, oh, it's going to happen next, and go really fast.
Yeah, and
honestly, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm not reading ahead, so yeah.
That's the thing, like for me, I get super into the plot, and like you don't need to know a lot of these things. The political stuff, it doesn't really matter. You don't really need to know. The what translations mean, you don't need to know. Like you just go with the flow and have a great experience.
Right, but it's fun to know all that stuff. So taking it super slow, I think, is helping. And because sort of chapter by chapter, like we're able to do things like I went back and read the hunt scene. You know, I never would have done that if I'd just been reading through the book.
Yeah.
So that is a difference.
Okay, can I say a couple bits that I like in the next section?
Please.
Okay, so I really like Lymond like being critical of how Harrison is a crappy spy.
Yeah.
His arrival just now in broad daylight would strike any qualified spy with the egg, whatever how you see that.
Just
and
anybody can see him.
Yeah, and like because Lymond is a qualified spy and he just can't stand mediocrity. And then also, do you think you can make Stuart speak? Tom Erskine asks, and it says, yes, said Lymond in the same pleasant voice, which is a hint. Anytime Lymond has a pleasant voice, it is not a pleasant topic, and he is not really feeling pleasant.
No. I also kind of liked just seeing Tom and Lymond working together. You know, I like them together, and I like that they're sort of, they have this like uneasy friendship. Like they're not good friends, but they are thrown together in circumstances where they have the same goals, and they're both really good guys, but just in very different ways. And,
Yeah.
They're good accomplices.
They're what?
Good accomplices. They work well off each other.
Yeah, and like I think that they both have respect for each other in, you know, in their strengths, and so it's fun to see each other.
I have people like that at work where we work together really well, but we have nothing to talk about, like outside of work.
Yeah.
You know?
They just don't have anything in common except Christian, and you know that's painful. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so unfortunately, the whole plan doesn't work. Surprise, surprise. Because of Margaret Lennox. So they waited and waited, and it turns out that he's been arrested on Warwick's command. He had sent 2 letters to the Queen and to her lords, and the incriminating letters had been taken to the Earl of Warwick by order of Margaret Lennox.
Mm-hmm. Big shock there. She's been paying attention.
So, and I just wrote at the end of the chapter, ugh, Margaret.
So you skipped my favorite line, which is where Tom says, "You should be rather pleased with O'LiamRoe," and Lymond says, "Well, yes, he got drunk on the palm wine of power. That was all right, but it was I who fell out of the tree." Which is that callback to the end of part 1, where he makes his comment about he's an educated man, he has a brain, he shall be made to use it. "I shall make him drunk on the palm wine of power," said Lymond sweepingly, "until he falls out of his tree."
Wow.
That I fell out of the tree. Oh, which is a nice, like, he seems to see that he went over the cliff. Like, Lymond is not, I don't think he's denying that he went way too far. And, yeah.
So I think the evidence is pretty obvious that he went a little far.
That's the end of this section.
So what's going to happen next? What do you think? What do you want?
Some trickery in London.
Oh my gosh.
Obviously, there's going to be a confrontation between Lymond and Robin, sorry, not Robert.
Yeah.
I hope
we have that.
What do you want to come out of that confrontation?
I don't know. I feel like Robin's going to give him the news. He's going to be like, all right, this is the guy that I'm working with. I feel bad about it. You know, I feel like I've been used by everybody in this plot, because he has been. And I don't know. We had already talked about him being a tragic character, and we think he's going to sort of try a redemption arc before things go bad for him.
Yeah, I still think that's true. I think he's going to try and redeem himself in some way, and he's going to fail. Like, I think that's, I still think that's going to happen. I mean, if we think about what's going on right now, so the Earl of Warwick has imprisoned Robin. So he's, I mean, I don't know if he's locked in the tower. Did it say where he was?
Did he imprison Robin or Bryce Harrison?
Robin.
No,
Bryce. You're right. Bryce.
Yeah.
Bryce.
I think Bryce is still free.
Sorry, you're right. Robin's still free. Bryce is imprisoned. So, but I have a sneaking suspicion that Bryce is going to talk in a heartbeat. Like, they probably already know where Robin is. Like, as long as Bryce knows where he is, like, there's no way he's not going to betray, like, whatever serves him best, like, even a hint of, hey, we're going to torture you, and he'll be like, oh, he's here, you know? So, I'm guessing that Robin is either going to flee London immediately, in which case the whole story is going to move back to France, or he's going to get arrested, and then there's going to have to be shenanigans, because why would the English like, especially if the Earl of Warwick wants the Queen to die, then they're not going to be too quick to give up Robin to the French and or Scottish. So yeah. So then are the English going to try and support Dabney? Is Margaret Lennox going to get involved in that?
Isn't she already?
Is she already involved in that?
That's what I would assume, that she's well aware of what Daubigny's been plotting or planning.
She's already well into the plot with the Queen.
What do you want to happen with Margaret Lennox?
Death.
And you liked her at the beginning.
I don't know. Well, I know. I don't know how historically she does die. Obviously, she does at some point, but it's going to have to mirror that, however she dies in these books. So
I want her to die.
I wish I did know, so I would know to expect it or not.
So here's the deal. I don't know if I want her to die because. So I've been a little bit frustrated with the incompetence of our current villain, and I feel like Margaret is not only competent, she has beaten Lymond more than once. Like, we have ample evidence that she can stay ahead of him, that she is an opponent worthy of good books, you know? Like, she's an opponent that I would like to see this continue for a while. I think them sort of trading victories and defeats back and forth would be, as a reader, I would be entertained by that. So
I'm sure her power is a little bit too politically high for him to actually touch, unfortunately, but
right. But she could, I mean, I could see lots of schemes that he's thwarting, and, you know, and he's got schemes that she's thwarting, and, you know, that kind of back and forth bits. I think that would be fun. But I think we are also hampered by the fact that she's a historical person, and so I don't think I can use, which is actually really interesting for me, is that I can't actually use my instincts in terms of what's good narrative to necessarily find out what's going to happen in this story, because she's a real person and she really died at some point and things really happened to her where she went places. So, like, she may vanish from the story because she vanished in real life. Like, there's no,
right.
I can't depend on, like, oh, this is where a narrative would typically go. So this, like, I can't depend on that. And that's actually kind of fun to know that. So, yeah.
It does mean, like, any kind of twist could be happening.
Yeah. And it's so funny for that to be true, that, like, real historical events are impacting the narrative in ways that are unexpected. And
well, you know, it's that way. It's the same way we talk about how we know that Mary Queen of Scots is going to be fine for now. Because, like, I know her history pretty well. I know when she dies. I know she leaves France at some point and goes back to Scotland, and then things aren't so good for her. But, you know.
She does marry the Dauphin, right? They're married for
does, but the Dauphin dies pretty early, so.
Yeah, he dies. She goes back to Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
She gets married, like, once or twice more.
Yeah, she doesn't really.
I don't know when she dies.
She doesn't have a very good relationship with, is it Elizabeth? No. Yeah,
it's Elizabeth.
Yeah.
What do you guys want to happen to Lymond in this rest of this book now that he's Vervassal Herald?
Vervassal Herald. Okay. What do I want to happen with Lymond? I would like definitely a clear confrontation with Robin, a clear confrontation with Dabney and or villain, if we're wrong about Dabney. Like, that definitely needs to be a whole thing. I hate to say, I kind of like to see a little something from the King of France, because I feel like Henri has just been like this shadowy figure in the back of everything, and it's kind of all his fault in some ways, in the sense that, like, the buck should stop with the person in charge, and he's in charge, and all of this stuff has been happening under his watch. And so if he's not actively in favor of the death of the young queen, then he's allowed all this to happen. And so I kind of want to see either someone dress him down a little bit, or to have some sort of acknowledgement of his complicity in all of this, because he is a little complicit. So.
How about you, Philippe? What do you want to see happen with Lymond?
I mean, it's not like he has to clear his name of anything anymore. I definitely want to see him return to the Lymond of the past. I want the Tatty Boy adventures to sort of be in his past. I did not like the downfall that was happening with him.
Was any of that enjoyable for you after the first dinner?
Not really.
Me neither.
I mean, it was fun to read about the debauchery of these parties, but I hated seeing what it was doing to Lymond. Because each situation he got himself into was more and more ridiculous. I did like the rooftop chase scene.
Yeah, you like
even though it was kind of a stupid stunt and he almost died literally of his own fault. It wasn't anybody else that was trying to kill him there. So, and Robin, who was trying to kill him, even went out of his way to save his life in that moment. So,
yeah, let's not forget that Lymond would be dead if it wasn't for Robin Stewart.
Yeah, which is why I still have some empathy for Robin. So,
yeah. I love the rooftop race, but it's not a good thing. It's just
it's not a good thing. And it's like, I feel like after the initial dinner, which was a delightful scene where he was very much in charge, you know, like Lymond was really had his thumb on everyone's, like what they wanted and what made that evening go, and he was directing that entire evening. And after that, it feels like the wheels go off the wagon more and more, and everything just gets more and more out of control the further into the story we get. And
well, but also even in that very first scene in the dinner, he's not in control the entire time, because there's that moment where they want to look at his injuries and he almost like messes up the whole thing by not letting them, which is just kind of this prelude of them wanting more of him and taking more of him than he wants to give.
Yeah. So all that to say, I agree with Philippe. I want to see Lymond in control of himself. Like I want to see him. I want to see the Lymond that can read the room, you know, and the Lymond that can walk in and, you know, manipulate the people around him, and but not in a way that's destructive to his own soul, if you will. Like,
yeah.
Lymond always finds some new way to be disruptive to his own soul, though. Yeah. Go ahead, Philippe. I'm sorry.
I'd like to see him get what he needs to expose D'Aubigny. So, if D'Aubigny is the villain.
Yeah. I really wish that there could be a reconciliation scene between the young queen and him, but she feels rejected by Tatty Boy and he's gone. So I don't know if will young Mary get a chance to.
I almost wondered young Mary knew, because the first time she meets him as Tatty Boy, she asks him for a riddle immediately.
Riddle, that's true.
What she did with Lymond, so.
Yeah.
She asked him for another riddle.
Another riddle, yeah. So I'd love to see him like build her up, you know, and just give her some sort of affirmation, because the last time they encountered each other, he unfortunately, through no fault of his own, had to be very dismissive of her. So
I mean, she's around historically for at least 15, 20 more years, so I have a feeling she'll interact with Lymond a couple of times in the future of these books.
But I would like to see it in this book.
Yeah.
Like, when she's a kid, like I'd like to
True.
Yeah, I don't want her to come back when she's like 23 and be like, "Hey, remember that time I dissed you when you were a kid? This is what's going on."
It was poison.
Yeah. So yeah.
Right. Anything else you guys are hoping for, or wishing for, or want to comment upon?
No, I think we'll be finishing the London section in our next one, so I'm excited to see what happens. And like you guys have been saying, a place that I know better than any of the other places we've been yet. So
nice to be in the city we know.
Mm-hmm. I still don't know it as well as either of you, even though I lived there for 4 months. But like, I basically stayed in New Cross Gate when I was there studying, so.
I've wandered nine summer. I've spent every summer for the last 9 years there, so lots of wandering.
I just went to see a theater show a lot.
Yeah. One last thing I would like to see is I'd like to see a conclusion to O'LiamRoe's narrative arc. Like, I would like to see him at the end of this book. Even if he's going to show up in later books as another character, like, even then, I still want his story in this book to come to a conclusion. Like, I want his growth as a character to end up somewhere that's leading him in a direction. So I'd like him to have a satisfying ending.
Yes, no death, please.
Yeah, no death. Please don't kill him. Please let him go back and like become the leader that he's supposed to be.
Robin can die, D'Aubigny can die, Una can die for all I care at this moment.
I don't really care.
No O'LiamRoe, please.
Yeah, I don't really like him.
I mean, this is Dorothy Dunnett who kills
I know.
puppies.
I'm worried for the characters I like, so. Except for Lymond. He's got 4.5 more books to be in. He'll be fine.
I'm not worried about him till Checkmate. Then,
right?
Then who knows?
Then we got to start worrying.
If this series ends with him dying in the last chapter,
you're going to hunt me down and kill me. I know.
I'm going to be so mad at you.
I mean, a lot of the comments that we've gotten are like, "Oh, they're worried that this character died. They have no idea what's coming." And I'm like, that's not a good feeling.
Yeah, who knows? So, but I'm sticking with it till the end, so.
Yes.
We'll see.
Yeah. All right. Well, then we will see everyone next time. Thank you all for watching and commenting.
Bye.
Bye, guys.